Welcome to the story. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and support me. Deep within the ancient mine, beyond the forgotten tunnels and crumbling shafts, a legend whispered among the miners had begun to take hold of Eldon's thoughts. It was said that in the heart of the earth, buried beneath centuries of rock and ruin, lay a magical artifact that could change the fate of humankind. The heart of Mithril. Eldon stood at the entrance of the old mine, the cool air mingling with the dust rising from the ground beneath his boots. His hand rested on the hilt of his pickaxe, the weight of the upcoming expedition heavy on his shoulders. Around him, his crew made final preparations. Kara, the youngest of the group and by far the most knowledgeable about the myths of their world, was poring over a tattered parchment filled with ancient symbols. Gorak, the brawny powerhouse of the team, tested the tension of the ropes they would soon descend on. Then there was Bryn, the quiet man who had once been a mage, though the spark of his magic had long faded into something almost forgotten. "We're ready," Kara said, pushing a strand of dark hair behind her ear. She looked up at Eldon, her eyes wide with excitement but tinged with the seriousness of their task. "If the writings are right, the heart is deep below, buried somewhere near the collapsed shafts." "Collapsed shafts," Eldon muttered, shaking his head. "We've been working this mine for years, and no one has ventured that far. This whole area's been considered cursed ever since those disappearances." Kara nodded but stood firm. "That's why the heart's been hidden for so long. No one's made it through. But we're not like them. We have the knowledge, the equipment. And the legends say the heart could change everything for us." Gorak grunted, lifting the rope with ease over his massive shoulder. "I don't care what the stories say. As long as we come back richer than we left, that's enough for me." Eldon's lips curled into a faint smile. "Let's hope we all come back, Gorak. This isn't going to be like anything we've faced before." Bryn remained silent, his eyes focused on the distant shadowed mouth of the mine. He hadn't spoken much since they'd set out on this journey, but his presence alone was a comfort to the others. The loss of his magic had weighed heavily on him, but Eldon suspected there was still a spark of the old mage in him. Whether that spark would ignite again was another matter entirely. The group descended into the mine, the darkness swallowing them with each step. Their lanterns cast long shadows on the ancient stone walls, revealing strange etchings, remnants of a time when magic flowed freely through the earth. Kara traced her fingers over the marks, deciphering the symbols as they walked. "They were here," she whispered. "The sentinels, the guardians of the heart. If we're close, we'll know soon enough." Eldon exchanged a glance with Gorak, who shrugged his massive shoulders. "As long as these sentinels aren't as tough as those legends say, we'll be fine." But even Gorak couldn't hide the unease settling in the air. The further they ventured, the more the temperature dropped. The mine was cold, but this was something different, an unnatural chill that bit through their thick clothing and gnawed at their bones. The echoes of their footsteps became sharper, and the silence between them grew heavier. Then, from the shadows, a low growl rumbled through the passageway. Eldon halted, raising his hand to signal the others. The growl grew louder, closer, as if the stone walls themselves were alive with the sound. Kara's eyes widened, and Gorak shifted his stance, gripping the handle of his axe tightly. From the darkness ahead, the first of the crag hounds emerged. Their bodies were made of stone and earth, their eyes glowing with an unnatural blue light. The creatures moved with a fluidity that belied their rocky forms, their jagged teeth bared in a snarl. There were 3 of them, and they were hungry. Eldon didn't hesitate. "Gorak, take the lead." With a roar, Gorak charged forward, his axe swinging in wide arcs. The first crag hound lunged at him, but Gorak was ready, his axe cleaving through the creature's stone hide with a sickening crunch. Kara darted behind him, her hands already moving to prepare a small explosive. She tossed it toward the second hound, the blast sending shards of rock and debris flying through the air, but the third hound was faster. It lunged at Eldon, its stone jaws snapping inches from his face. He stumbled back, barely managing to bring his pickaxe up in time to deflect the creature's attack. The force of the blow sent him crashing into the wall, the wind knocked from his lungs. Bryn, watching from the sidelines, narrowed his eyes. Something stirred within him, a faint, flickering pulse of the magic he had once wielded. But it was gone as quickly as it had come, leaving only the cold emptiness behind. Gorak finished the last of the hounds with a final swing of his axe, panting heavily as the shattered remains of the creatures crumbled to the ground. What in the gods' name were those things? Crag hounds, Kara said, her voice steady despite the adrenaline still coursing through her veins. Guardians of the mine. They're ancient, like the sentinels, but they're not supposed to leave their territory. Well, they didn't get the message, Gorak grunted, wiping sweat from his brow. Eldon pushed himself to his feet, wincing at the pain in his side. If those are the first things we run into, I can't imagine what the sentinels will be like. Kara nodded, her expression grim. We're getting close. The heart is near. They pressed on, deeper into the mine, each step more cautious than the last. The air grew heavier with every footfall, the oppressive weight of magic and time pressing down on them. Bryn walked in silence, his mind racing. He could feel the magic here, old, powerful, and still very much alive. It called to him, a distant echo of the power he had once commanded. But it was not his to wield, not anymore. The passageways twisted and turned, leading them into a vast underground cavern. The space was enormous, the ceiling so high it disappeared into darkness. But what drew their attention was the center of the cavern, where a glowing object hovered above the ground, suspended in a field of shimmering light. The heart of Mithril.it was more magnificent than any of them had imagined. The gem pulsed with a deep, silver light, its surface covered in intricate, glowing runes. The air around it buzzed with raw magic, a power so intense it made the hairs on their skin stand on end. But they were not alone. The ground beneath their feet trembled as the ancient guardians of the heart awoke. Massive figures, carved from the very stone of the cavern, began to rise from the shadows. The sentinels of stone were here. They towered over the miners, their eyes glowing with the same blue light as the crag hounds. Their forms were crude but powerful, their limbs heavy with the weight of centuries. Each step they took shook the ground, sending ripples of dust through the cavern. Eldon's heart pounded in his chest. We need to move. Now. Kara's voice was shaky as she reached for the explosive charges strapped to her belt. We can't fight them head-on. We need to use the environment. Gorak nodded, already moving to position himself between the sentinels and the others. I'll hold them off. You two figure out how to get that heart. The sentinels roared, the sound echoing through the cavern like thunder. Gorak's axe swung through the air, meeting the first sentinel's massive arm with a deafening clang. The creature barely flinched, its stone form too dense to be damaged by mere steel. But Gorak was relentless, using every ounce of his strength to distract the beasts. Kara scrambled to plant explosives around the base of the cavern walls, her hands shaking as she worked. If we can bring down part of the ceiling, we might be able to trap them long enough to grab the heart. Bryn stood frozen, his eyes locked on the heart of Mithril. The magic pulsing from the artifact was overwhelming, its power calling out to him, begging to be touched, to be used. He could feel the faint stirrings of his old abilities returning, the magic he had lost so long ago. But he couldn't bring himself to act. Eldon grabbed his arm, snapping him out of his daze. "Bryn, we need you. Now." Bryn blinked, his gaze shifting from the heart to Eldon. The weight of his old life pressed down on him, the life of a mage, a life he had given up. But the heart was right there. Its power was within his reach. Could he really walk away from it now? The ground shook again as one of the sentinel's massive fists slammed into the earth, sending a cloud of dust into the air. Gorak was struggling to hold his ground, and the explosives Kara had planted wouldn't be enough to stop all of them. Bryn made his decision that he stepped forward, toward the heart. The magic surrounding it was almost suffocating, but he pushed through, his hand reaching out to grasp the gem. As his fingers brushed its surface, a surge of power shot through him, flooding his veins with raw magic. It was overwhelming, more power than he had ever felt in his life. His senses expanded, and for a moment, he could see everything: the heart, the sentinels, the magic that held the cavern together. But with the power came understanding. The sentinels weren't just mindless creatures, they were bound to the heart, their very existence tied to its magic. If he wanted to stop them, he had to sever that connection. "Get ready," Bryn called out, his voice stronger than it had been in years. Eldon and Kara exchanged a glance but nodded. They trusted him, even if they didn't fully understand what he was about to do. Bryn closed his eyes, focusing on the flow of magic through the heart. He could feel the sentinel's presence, like strings of energy tied to the gem. Slowly, carefully, he began to untangle those strings, breaking the bonds that held the creatures together. The sentinels roared in fury, their movements growing more erratic as they felt the magic slipping away from them. Gorak barely managed to dodge one of their wild swings, his axe useless against their stone bodies. "Bryn, whatever you're doing, do it faster," Eldon shouted. Bryn gritted his teeth, pushing harder. The magic fought against him, but he was stronger now. He could do this. With a final surge of power, he severed the last connection. The sentinels froze, their stone forms cracking and crumbling as the magic that sustained them faded away. Within moments, the cavern was silent once more, the sentinels reduced to piles of rubble. Eldon let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. "You did it." Bryn nodded, his hand still gripping the heart of Mithril. The power was still there, humming just beneath the surface. But he knew now that it wasn't his to keep. The heart belonged to the world, not to any one person. They left the cavern, the heart of Mithril safely in their possession. As they emerged from the mine, the first rays of dawn broke over the mountains, casting the world in a soft, golden light. The heart of Mithril had been found, and with it, humanity's hope for a brighter future. They returned to the kingdom as heroes. The journey out of the mine had been tense, with every step a reminder of the fragility of their victory. The earth had trembled beneath them as the mine slowly collapsed, but the four of them had made it out just before the final cave-in. Now, standing before the council, they presented the heart of Mithril, an artifact of unimaginable power that radiated a soft, pulsating light, casting long shadows across the council chamber. Eldon felt the weight of the room's gaze fall heavily upon him and his team. The council members, cloaked in the rich fabrics of their status, leaned forward in their seats, eager to see the artifact that could change the tide of the war against the dark forces. They whispered among themselves as Bryn held the heart, the gem glowing gently in his hands. The energy within it felt contained but alive, like a storm waiting to be unleashed. "We did what we set out to do," Eldon said, his voice steady. "The heart of Mithril is yours now. Use it wisely." The head of the council, an elderly man with a sharp gaze and flowing silver robes, rose slowly from his seat. His eyes flicked from the heart to the miners. "You have done more than we ever expected," he he said, his voice measured. "This artifact, its power is beyond what we imagined. It will be the key to our victory, no doubt." Bryn shifted uneasily, the gem still glowing in his hands. He could feel the power flowing through him, but it came with a warning. The heart was not a simple weapon to be wielded recklessly. "It's powerful," he said, speaking for the first time since they entered the chamber. "But it's dangerous. It's tied to forces older than we know. If you use it wrong, it could bring more harm than good." The room fell silent, the council members exchanging glances. The head councilman nodded thoughtfully. "A tool of great power must always be handled with care. We will ensure it is studied properly before it's used in battle." Eldon watched Bryn's jaw tighten, but he didn't speak further. The rest of the group was weary, their minds still reeling from the experience in the mine. Kara and Gorak stood close by, Kara occasionally glancing at the heart with a mix of awe and wariness. Gorak, usually eager to boast of their accomplishments, remained quiet, his muscles still tense from the fight with the sentinels. After the formalities of the meeting ended, they were allowed to leave the council chamber. As the heavy doors shut behind them, Eldon exhaled deeply. The weight of the mission's success lifted slightly, though the sense of unease still lingered. "What now?" Kara asked quietly as they made their way through the stone corridors of the palace. "We did what they asked, but it doesn't feel like it's over." Bryn glanced down at his hands, which still seemed to hum with the residue of magic from the heart. "It's not over. The heart is only the beginning. They don't understand what they have." Gorak nodded, his deep voice cutting through the air. "We faced those things in the mine, and that was just guarding the heart. Imagine what's out there, what the dark forces might send now that we have this." Eldon frowned. He had thought bringing the heart back would be the end of their troubles, but Bryn was right. The heart's power wasn't a shield, it was a beacon, and the darkness would come for it. They walked in silence for a while, each of them lost in their thoughts, until they reached the edge of the palace grounds where their quarters awaited. Eldon paused at the threshold, turning to face his team. "We don't know what's coming next, but we've faced worse than most ever will. Whatever happens, we stay ready. We stick together." Kara gave a small smile, her usual bravado tempered by the weight of the recent events. "We've survived this long, haven't we?" Gorak let out a low chuckle. "Survived is right. But something tells me the fun's just starting." Bryn didn't laugh. His eyes were distant, still on the heart, though it had been passed to the council. "I'll head back to the tower," he said quietly. "There's something I need to study. About the magic. I'll meet you tomorrow." Eldon nodded, watching as Bryn walked off into the evening shadows. He could feel that the mage had changed. The power from the heart was still inside him, lingering, and Eldon wasn't sure if that was a good thing. The next few days passed in a blur of exhaustion and debriefings. The council sought more information from the group, probing them for every detail about the mine, the sentinels, and the heart itself. Kara provided as much information as she could from the old texts she had read, while Gorak and Eldon recounted the fight with the crag hounds and the stone guardians. But Bryn remained distant, spending most of his time in isolation, studying the heart's magical properties from afar. It wasn't until the fourth day that trouble struck. Eldon was in the market square, buying supplies for the next journey when a sharp commotion rose from the direction of the council hall. People scattered, and a wave of panic surged through the square. Eldon grabbed the arm of a passerby. "What's going on?" The woman's face was pale. "The council, something happened. Some kind of magic explosion. People are saying it came from the chamber where they kept the heart. His blood ran cold. Eldon broke into a run, weaving through the streets until he reached the palace grounds. Guards were rushing back and forth, and the air was thick with smoke and the unmistakable smell of burnt ozone, residual magic. Eldon's stomach twisted with dread as he pushed his way through the crowd of onlookers gathered outside the council chamber. The heavy doors were splintered and blasted inward, the wood charred black. Inside, it was chaos. Several council members lay motionless on the ground, while others stumbled around in a daze. In the center of the room, where the heart of Mithril had once been kept, there was now a gaping, empty space. The heart was gone. Bryn. Eldon's voice boomed through the chamber, his mind racing. He knew Bryn had been studying the heart, but the look of the wreckage, the violence of the magic explosion, it didn't seem like Bryn's doing. Eldon's gut told him this was something else, something darker. Kara appeared at his side, out of breath and wide-eyed. What happened? They've lost the heart, Eldon growled. It's gone. Gorak arrived moments later, his axe strapped to his back, his expression grim. Where's Bryn? Before Eldon could respond, a figure emerged from the shadows of the room. It was Bryn, his face pale, his eyes wild with fear and confusion. He stumbled forward, his hands raised as if in surrender. I didn't take it, he gasped. I was trying to stop it, I swear. Eldon rushed forward, grabbing Bryn by the shoulders. What happened? Bryn shook his head, still trembling. It wasn't me. The heart, it reacted to something. I tried to contain it, but the magic, it was too strong. Someone else is controlling it. Kara frowned. What do you mean someone else? Who? Bryn's eyes darted around the room, his voice barely a whisper. The darkness. It's here. It's already here. The ground beneath them trembled, and a cold wind swept through the chamber, carrying with it the faint echo of a distant, otherworldly voice. Eldon's heart sank as he realized the truth. The heart of Mithril had fallen into the wrong hands. And the darkness was no longer coming for them. It was already here.